Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's Capstone webinar, our fifth webinar in a series of webinars on increasing supply chain maturity to improve bottom line outcomes. Today, we will focus on the virtual supply chain management online assessment. The assessment takes about 30 minutes of your leadership's time to build an aligned action plan. Again, we appreciate that you are attending today, and we are all focused on building that resilient enterprise, and we hope that your family are happy and safe. This is an interactive webinar. We expect to see polling response in our polling that we just discussed here, the pollev.com, Greg Schlegel 910. Please click on that and answer the survey. We would appreciate your feedback. And of course, in all our webinars, we love to gain your feedback throughout the webinar. So please do enter into the chat box and or the Q&A box, and we'll be looking for that throughout the webinar. My name is Jim Vries, founder president of Enhance International Group, and I will be the host of today's webinar. We also have Connor Fincham from Uphaven to help us from South Africa. And joining me today, of course, is Greg Schlegel, which will be sharing his vast experiences. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency, and he was a former president of Apex ASCM. Greg, a few words of introduction.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Folks, great to be here with you to talk again about our passion, supply chain maturity. I am the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've been in business for about 12 years. We'll talk more about the consortium in a minute. I've taught supply chain risk management and supply chain management at Lehigh University over the last 10 years. I still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University here in the States in Pennsylvania. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant and a practice lead. Spent 30 plus years as a supply chain exec with several different Fortune 100 manufacturers. And again, I've taught SCM at the undergraduate and graduate level in 6 different universities here in the States. So pleasure to be with you today. I'll turn it back to Jim.
With that, Greg, I'm going to turn it right back to you. All right.
Okay. Yep. I said we'll talk a little bit about, we'll give you a thumbnail sketch. This is the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. It's about 31 companies at the moment. That's about 1,500 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. These companies that you see on the right, and we've stratified them into 3 tiers, they bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks in your supply chain. What we provide on the left, 5 basic areas. We have 2 online certificate courses. They're MBA oriented. They have assignments. One's a basic supply chain risk and resiliency. The other is geared totally towards public healthcare and NGO supply chains. You, again, receive certification from these courses. We do coaching and consulting for companies across all industries. We bring SCRM platform solutions to help visibility and predictability. And we are very proud about our 2 online readiness, our 2 online assessments. One is supply chain management online readiness, which we're going to talk at length about today. And the bottom is a prescriptive online supply chain risk and resiliency 90-day action plan using AI and ML algorithms. So that's who we are on the right. That's what we provide on the left. And now I'll turn it over to Jim.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Just a little background on Enhance International Group. We've been around for about 7 years now, and we're an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation. And we have over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers providing focused enterprise information management to all the way through supply chain risk management. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partner tenured expertise. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining, positive margin growth, the competitive advantage, and focused 90-day action plans. So again, we really focus on delivering that power to you and put it into your hands in a very short period of time, from technology to consulting. So let's talk a little bit about this diagram we see in front of us. That's what we call the bicycle slide. And EIG has modeled the company's ecosystem within these two wheels, linking strategy to execution. The two geared wheels are connected by the chain, with the strategy wheel being the larger of the two. Of course, one rotation of strategy should yield many execution cycles. Developing an agile supply chain mindset will ensure that we have a successful journey overall. Since the front wheel strategy moves at a slower rotation speed, the rear gear execution is always the result, and a solid strategy will result in those many execution cycles. In summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and of course, the stockholder. Quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you got to keep on moving. So let's get moving here into our webinar series. And as you can see, this is our 5th webinar. Our first webinar focused on best-in-class benchmarking on our 13 tenets. The second webinar brings in your whole organization and the different perspectives, and we talked about that. That's our tier 2 offering. Tier 3 offering gets into benchmarking. We'll talk a little bit about that today, how you perform relative to your competition. And then most importantly, how do you move forward with a process improvement prioritization? All this is online, very easy to do, taking only like 30, 45 minutes of your time, and you gain an awful lot of information on how to move your supply chain program forward. And our 4th webinar talked about the acceleration playbook on how to accelerate through your maturity and improve it. We'll talk more about that today. And of course, today is our Capstone webinar. So we really want to get we call it a fireside chat because we're expecting and look forward to your questions throughout this. We'll be driving the slides, but please do ask questions throughout. Our agenda today, again, is the supply chain readiness assessment, a brief overview, and then how do you gain value through supply chain maturity. So linking supply chain maturity to performance. Of course, everybody wants to get, as it shows on the right, that financial performance of revenue growth, profitability. Everybody wants throughput, yields, and we're looking for that, especially in this time of trying to recover from all the COVID lockdowns and the changing supply chains. The third item on the list is the industry testimonials. Greg's will go through that and show you how companies have made a big impact by using the supply chain readiness assessment. Then we'll get into the Gartner maturity model. That demand-driven maturity model is pretty much a staple. That's over 10 years old and pretty much known as the benchmark in supply chain management maturity. And then how do you accelerate time to value with benefits, and then closing comments on linking maturity to financial performance. So that's the agenda today. Again, please do ask your questions throughout the webinar, and then we'll get right into it. So a quick recap on supply chain management assessment deliverables. Again, we have a 4-tier system. Tier 1 is an individual taking on the assessment. Again, about 25 minutes of your time. It's free. The link is in the webinar, in the slides. We'll be sending that out, but it's free, easy to take. 25 minutes, you can take it, test it, then you can maybe promote it with your colleagues, and you get your executive team across your organization of your business unit taking it in tier 2, and that's for 5K. And we'll provide a very formal report, and we'll look at it from a strategic, tactical, and operational perspective. And then we'll provide you coaching and consulting 8 hours for that 5K. Tier 3 is a little bit more, it's about 12K, but out of this, you get a benchmark comparison of how you perform relative to your industry. So in tier 2, it's more of a best-in-class overall assessment and where you fall overall. But in tier 3, it's how do you perform versus your competition. And then that online improvement, and we'll go into that a little bit more, and coaching and consulting of 16 hours. And then tier 4, which is really the rank and file of how do you really increase maturity, to that next level. And there we'll give you a tailored playbook for you and your team on how to move forward in the supply chain risk and resiliency. All our tiers are tailored to your needs, from tier 2 to tier 4. You'll get some standard stuff, but we will be working with you to tailor it to your organization's needs. With that, we just want to talk about, again, the importance of tiers 2 and 3 and even 4 of gaining that single supply chain management language with aligned goals, and in gaining that perspective for the business unit that you would be rolling this out with. And these are the type of positions that we would espouse to have filling out the tier 2 and 3 assessments. And these are the key stakeholders we see in the supply chain, everybody from supply chain manager or director, or maybe VP, all the way through finance, engineering, operational excellence, sales, and operations. So it's really everybody on your team, all those executive folks on your team is key for this. Again, when you bring all that in, you gain some great insights in the tier 4 assessment. And again, these insights provide and confirm your tier 1 through 3 offerings. And it gives you that detailed assessment on how to move your organization forward and aligning those best practices. And the deliverables, I think one of the key deliverables out of this playbook is your prioritized ranking relative to the benchmarks, and really a deep dive into that. And then these top 10 questions to ask the organization to confirm their readiness for improvement. Of course, we'll do the on-site virtual stakeholder interviews, and be working with you hand in hand with the playbook to build you that action plan throughout the next 12 to 18 months, or however period you would like. Again, we're focused on driving 90-day improvements. So it's, again, it's the readiness of your organization to make the changes needed. And here you get 32 hours. So as it says here on the bottom left, do you know how you are aligned? That is, gaining that alignment to drive supply chain management forward is really the focus of the playbook. Again, that's a little bit more expensive, but it provides quite a bit of insights, and it's tailored for you. With that, we're going to come back to the polling question, and we appreciate the responses. When was the last time you performed a supply chain assessment? Less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, greater than 3 years, or you have not done one yet. So again, thanks for responding. Looks like we have a few responses, and we'll go and check it out. So it looks like we have a few 1 to 2 years and a few that have not had the opportunity to complete an assessment. Well, we encourage you to take our assessment. It's free. So those folks that said haven't done one, there's a free assessment. Maybe you guys can fill it out. Go ahead, Greg. Any comments?
Yeah, thanks for the answers, because we never know exactly based on the audience that we're speaking to, but I would echo Jim's comment that hopefully by the end of this session, you will see the compelling reason to actually exercise a supply chain maturity assessment, especially because it's available to you and it's free. So thanks for the engagement to profile the answers. We appreciate that.
All right, so I think I'll hand this over to Greg as soon as my cursor catches up with me.
Yep.
Go ahead, Greg.
You bet. In this section, we thought we'd start with giving you some insight on gaining value add through supply chain maturity. So we want to give you some insight. So we'll start, I believe, first with building a resilient enterprise. And this is somewhat of this is the why. Why would you spend any time doing supply chain assessment, going across 13 tenets? Why would you do this? Well, we think we have a great definition. We placed it in our book way back when, and I just want to share it with you. A resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions, which we all are living with at the moment, and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of its customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. Now, I'll be honest with you, that is a pretty tall order, folks. But what we've come to realize is to be able to build a resilient enterprise, you have to mature your supply chain processes. So that's how we wanted to start the dialogue, and we'll move forward. I want to make sure that, there we go. There we go. We saw this article. We work a lot with Supply Chain Brain. It's a magazine. They both have published magazines, and they're big online. We've worked with them for about 10, 12 years. This was a 2019 article from them with the Hackett Group. If you're not aware of the Hackett Group, they're big research supply chain, especially on cash to cash cycle time, which we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides. So just a real quick thumbnail sketch here. Bob Bowman, he's one of the key individuals at Supply Chain Brain. He does a lot of online and in-person interviews. He was talking to the associate principal of the Hackett Group back in 2019, Craig Bailey, and essentially Bowman asked several questions, but we wanted to just share with you this key question. Bob asked, what's the biggest takeaway from the 2019 Hackett Group report? What did they see? Well, here was Craig's answers. They said, and remember, this is pre-pandemic. Organizations were starting to tighten up their end-to-end supply chains. Very good. They're looking at their product portfolios. They're right-sizing and retiring marginal products. And looking forward, companies are attempting to strengthen their cash position going forward by tightening up their accounts receivable functions and collection activities, and starting to tackle the inventory issue of both shortages and excess. So this kind of leads into our next slide, which we want to give you some statistics and insight on this thing called cash conversion cycle. All right. We think it's a key metric for two reasons. One, it can improve supply chain performance, and it's also a risk mitigation tactic. So what is it? Cash conversion cycle up on the top in the middle is basically days of sales outstanding in a calendar days, plus days of inventory outstanding minus payables. Real simple calculation. No calculus, no differential calculus. Real simple. All right. And on the left, we place this. Why would you be interested in cash conversion cycle? Organizations have needed to accelerate their actions to protect employees, customers, suppliers, and financial results. The challenges are many and varied. We know that. With some companies losing, now this is in 2020, some companies losing up to 75% of their revenues in a single quarter. So in this particular crisis, and this was from McKinsey in 2020, during the pandemic, cash is always king in a crisis, and it's now critical for survival. So if you can't produce cash flow, free cash, you don't have a company. All right. We hate to be glib, but it's very important. So what does some of the data look like? Let's take a look. This comes from Aberdeen, good friend of the consortium. They do a lot of research in supply chain as well regarding cash conversion cycle. They tend to develop maturity classes on the middle in the blue column there. We don't know why they do this, but they call them best in class, industry average, and laggards. All right. We wouldn't call them that, but it's what they do. So let's take a look. They say, all right, top 20% of all the respondents are normally best in class. Take a look at the data. That best in class set of companies has an average cash conversion cycle of 21 days. Look at the return on working capital for those companies, 43%. Look at the on time and complete to the customer in terms of a delivery rate, 97% on time. Take a look at the inventory industry average, the middle 50% in the middle of the bell-shaped curve. Their cash conversion cycle, 59 days, much higher, lower working capital, and lower on-time delivery. And then finally, the laggards, the last 30% on the bottom, look at their cash conversion cycle, 70 days. Look at the working capital, 9%, and the on-time delivery. It's a compelling profile between being best in class and being average and laggard. So remember, the lower the cash conversion cycle in days, the higher the free cash you can develop. All right. And so we're going to get ready to talk more about supply chain performance, and we wanted to give you some insight on cash conversion cycle. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. So as you can see from Greg's overview, the compelling cash is king is a very important set of metrics. And so next we will look at some research. So we're going to go back to the annals of history here back in 2009, which seems like ages ago, but it's still relevant. A Swedish group of folks from the University of Gau put together this research paper, probably for a master's or a PhD thesis, and they published it. I think it's very good. And, just as some background, studies linking supply chain maturity and financial performance. This has been performed many times over the years, over the last 20, 30 years. Of course, the big four consulting companies have done these, ASCM, SCORE, CSCMP. I think these are all been done many, many times. We'd like this study. It was published. It's available to anyone. But this and many other studies have proved that increasing maturity does translate into bottom line, driving scalable growth and positive margins. Very often when we're working with clients, they say, does it really pay to be more mature, or should we just get the cost out and that will do it? It's the sustainability piece of that. Getting cost out will give you short-term results, but not drive long-term profitability and sustainability. And this is what this showed. can you grow year over year in your financial performance? And is that linked to supply chain management maturity, SCMM? And they use the SCORE model of plan, source, make, deliver, and return. And then they looked at financial metrics, some pretty straightforward metrics of cash flow, which Greg just covered, top line sales growth, inventory turnover, cost of goods sold, COGS, gross margin, operating margin, net margin, return on assets, and return on investment. So these are very common metrics that I think any company or all companies use to measure their financial performance. So they came up with 3 hypotheses, as you see, H1, H2, and H3, and we'll cover those in this next slide. So the first hypothesis is the effect between supply chain process maturity and the current financial performance. So that was the first. Is there an effect between maturity and financial performance? The second hypothesis is the effect between the prior year financial performance and the current year. So year over year performance and financials was that, did those 15 companies that they did this study with, did that drive a correlation? And the third hypothesis is that total effect of prior year financial performance and supply chain process maturity on a current year financial performance. So there's a combination of the financial performance and your maturity over last year's performance. Can that be proven empirically? Again, the question is, does supply chain maturity impact financial performance? And again, this is something that has been debated over years and years, and you talk to any C-suite, they still can't agree on this. But it's been proven. So the sample size, again, was 15 companies, but again, we would say that there's even more studies that are proving that. So from the hypothesis 1, the conclusions, the supply chain process maturity of the effect of source and the supply chain management model of plan, source, make, deliver on inventory were considerable. So that they were able to find a correlation. And the second hypothesis, the effect of prior year performance to the current, also had it, and it has proved, and it's shown that there is a positive association along the financial ratios. And then the third hypothesis is the presence of the prior year financial results and supply chain maturities together could estimate the amount of inventory turnover of current year. Now, that's pretty powerful. So, you know, as you saw with Aberdeen's slide in those results, you saw that a pretty clear correlation between those as you step through those 3 stages. And again, this has been proven many times. So this is, again, we're trying to prove that our 13 tenets, if you have a plan to improve your maturity, you're going to get that bottom line results. And with that, we're going to move to the next section. Greg.
Yeah, you bet. We think that's pretty powerful, folks. You know, strong statistical correlations. So we wanted to share a couple of solid survey studies or thesis studies to just give you a sense of the correlation. We're convinced. And we're practitioners as well, going way back. So we wanted to give you additional insight on testimonials from companies associated with the readiness assessment. Just to give you a sense, we've done this readiness assessment over 12 years with hundreds of companies, all right, across multiple industries. So we want to just share with you a couple of different industry comments and testimonials after the companies went through the assessment tools. So, and you can tee them up. You can tee all of them up, Jim. We'll just give the folks 2 out of the 5, maybe. You can see the industries: consumer packaged goods, electronics, heavy industrial, chemicals, and even healthcare, NGOs, who don't produce things, but they move material back and forth in the healthcare arena. I'll just pick two. One on electronics. We thought that was pretty interesting. The gentleman basically came out and had three quick thoughts. One, the assessment provided a very comprehensive approach. Two, exposed potential areas for further investigation. And three, required that all their stakeholders get involved. And that comes from an electronics VP of operations. And in heavy industry, the gentleman said, basically, your assessment tool was the most complete supply chain management assessment method I have seen. And he further answered it by saying, I've been in this business for 40 years, and we felt very pleased to hear that from him, because he was in heavy industry and he was an aerospace and defense executive. So you can see the rest, some pretty good testimonials, we feel, in terms of the level of detail and the comprehensiveness of the 13 tenet assessment. So with that, we'll give you some more insight. If you haven't been with us on previous webinars, we have a use case right here of the assessment tool. This happens to be Zara, fast fashion retail apparel. Back in 2015, went through the assessment, and they were operating. You can take a look at the profile. They were operating very closely to an exemplar status, which is the kind of the orange circle at the level 3, and they went through all 13 tenets, and you can see their answers, which are the black lines. All right, and so with that, they basically came up with one outlier. So we call them, the outlier that you can see it yourself is information systems, back down on the 5 o'clock level on the clock. And the reason that it was an IT outlier is at this point in time in 2015, they had over 25 1970-like systems supporting their organization. So what were they doing? They had old circa 1970 solutions cobbled together, and they were still performing at a very high level when it comes to supply chain performance. All right. And they agreed with the outlier. I think they were actually asking us to validate their internal assumptions, which is exactly what we did. They agreed. And so what they do? They basically took this as the confirmation and achieved best in their sector. And what did they do? They took the multi-million dollars of free cash, because they're very good, and they built themselves a supply chain risk and resiliency war room. They did multi-million dollar. We don't know where it is, but they monitor their supply chain and their risk 24/7, 365. And we did some more. We took a little more. This is kind of tier 2 now. You can see their best in class calculation, because they are very close to the exemplar circle, came up with 3.01. This is 7 years ago. And we put together their strengths. What were their strengths? We talk about in tier 2, strategic, tactical, and operational. And essentially they demonstrated to us that their strength overall was in operations, getting it done, moving product through their supply chain to their customer. And remember, the lower the number in this tier 2 analysis on the bottom left, the stronger that discipline is. And so you can see on the right-hand side of the graph, the strategic elements of the tool are in blue, the tactical are in red, and the operational are in green. And then you can see the strengths of the 3 disciplines by the picture image and the size of the ovals. So we wanted to share that with you in terms of a use case using tier 1 and tier 2. We have a few others. Moving right along. All right, we have this section is what we call navigating the Gartner maturity growth. So we're going to give you a sense of a recap of each of the tiers, and then Jim is going to talk about how we relate to the Gartner maturity model. So with that, we can move into a recap again, if you haven't been with us, a recap of tier 1. All right, pretty simple. You can see we calculate on the top, we have 4 basic elements. You're a leader, you're in the mainstream, you're an apprentice, or you're in what we call the ring of fire. All right, what do we mean by that? Well, we've put together 30 years of SCM practical experience and Big 5 consulting, 12 years of risk management experience, and we developed the 13-tiered assessment tool that you see on the bottom left. It basically does 2 things. It assesses your supply chain maturity and your inherent risk. So let's talk a little bit about it, and then we'll move on. There's 13 tenets. In our point of view, these make up a good end-to-end supply chain process. The star chart's a maturity model depicting how mature your company's supply chain processes are, where the lower the actual number on the chart, the more mature your process is. As you go through the 92 questions, you can see a company's response, which normally is the black lines, relative to the risk levels. Remember, the farther away the black line is from the center of the graph, the less mature the supply chain process is at that time. Secondarily, we developed risk levels within that maturity process. And again, the farther you are from the center, the higher the inherent risk. You can see the 3 levels of risk. The green is low level. The orange is in the middle. You have more inherent risk. And then you can see the red circle. That's what we call the ring of fire. If you're at or outside of that ring of fire, we would say your supply chain process is at risk. The output, it assesses your maturity and immature processes. You can investigate the immature like Zara did, where they jumped all over the outlier, and you can reinforce the mature processes. So you want to address the surprises. You want to develop an action plan to address the immature processes, get your stakeholders aligned, and then what does good look like? Improvements being made on a regular basis. That's really the tail of the tape. That's what we're after. Next, another recap. Tier 2. We talked a little bit about Tier 2 in the Zara use case. Tier 2, we move a little bit forward, and essentially we've categorized, as I mentioned, the 13 tenets on the left into strategic, tactical, and operational elements. And again, the blue are strategic, the red are tactical, and the green are operational. And so what you see is the black line represents an organization's actual survey answers, and then we profile your strategic, tactical, and operational strengths. And we'll provide more insight on that in a minute, but you can see the little different organization here. They're mainstream, we call it. They're 5.7 from a calculation point of view. And then down on the bottom, you can see their different strengths in terms of they seem to be more strategic. That's their strength discipline, and then tactical and operational. So we not only give you an as is, but we give you a profile of your strengths and weaknesses from the supply chain assessment tool. So output, you get a unit perspective, supply chain process maturity, that's tier 1. You also get a profile of your strengths and weaknesses. What's the call to action? We want to align the vision relative to your best in class. We want to help you validate the supply chain process maturity using strategic, tactical, and operational profiles. And we want to get you aligned. And what does good look like? Your business unit has consensus, meaning you bring these multiple disciplines from a product line or a division into the mix, answer the questions, and you get some consensus in terms of what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and how do we maybe bolster up the weaknesses and even strengthen our discipline. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to talk about a few more recaps.
Thanks, Greg. Pretty cool stuff. So tier 3, I say this is when we get jiggy, is how are you performing relative to your competition? And your competition, are you a leader in your group? Are you a follower? Are you average, or are you a laggard? Kind of like what Aberdeen said. And we'll rank that for you on your use case. So are you a leader, follower, or laggard? And that's based on our 12 years of experience in the data we've been able to collect. And so for the output for this is you have two major outputs: the supply chain maturity position within your industry and understanding your industry relative to the overall best-in-class maturity. So you'll see this, where your industry is relative to that overall best-in-class performance of what Greg just covered. And of course, the practical call to action here is align mission relative to your industry. The value proposition validates the supply chain process maturity within your industry. How is your industry moving? How fast are they moving relative to other industries up and down your supply chain? And the discussions about the alignment across your supply chain stakeholders. And so what does good look like? If you're happy with your position, how can we help you maintain that position? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And if you're not happy with the position, how can we assist you in improving that position? So again, we'll be getting into that a little bit later. I just want to introduce you to the concept. So that's the first deliverable of tier 3. So you get quite a bit in tier 3. The second deliverable is centered around importance and satisfaction and how important it is within your organization. So you say, I want to move forward. You want to improve. And which area should we improve? So we help you prioritize those tenets from what you think is important and where you're most satisfied with. And we come up with these ranked Paretos for you on where you would want to focus. And the details of how we calculate those numbers is covered in our tier 3 webinar. And we can cover those at that time. If you have any questions, please do reach out. But just to move forward, the output here is, of course, your business unit perspective on what's important within your supply chain, and the business unit perspective on how satisfied you are within the supply chain in a ranking of both importance and satisfaction. So again, these will tell you where you're going to focus and can be linked to your AOP planning, your annual operating planning of what you're going to focus on in the next 6 to 18 months. The value proposition is, of course, to validate your supply chain improvement of your company and a discussion about alignment across all your supply chain stakeholders, gaining that alignment. And what does good look like? If you believe about the ranking, we will, if you believe the ranking we'll develop that action plan. If we don't, usually that will require more consensus building action plan with you and your team on what's important in your organization if it's not aligned. So I do see 2 questions in the chat. Greg, do you have a chance to open that up and see what they're asking?
Yeah, they're not really a question, just a greeting from one of the members of the audience. So
all right,
yeah,
great.
I'm watching it. Yeah, nothing
right,
definitive at the moment. You bet.
All right, but thanks for reaching out and saying hello.
Uh,
All right. So with that, we'll move on to tier 4. Again, this is that supply chain improvement acceleration playbook that we talked about earlier in the webinar. it's that practical call to action. We're really providing tailored supply chain improvement for you to help you move in maturity. If you're stuck and you need more help, this is really for you. Again, it's 3 different perspectives in terms of supply chain management, as Greg mentioned before: practitioner, academic, and Big 5 consulting. The value prop for this is improvements that follow a concerted roadmap that is prioritized to maximize maturity in the shortest amount of time. So we want to get you there as quick as you can. Of course, that's based on the readiness of your organization, which we will work with you on. We want to make sure you do the right things in the right time, in the right way, in the right order. Very often we see folks trying to make improvements that they're not really ready for, their organization's not ready for. And it won't really work without making sure we do it in the right order. So what does good look like for us? Improving your weak processes, sustaining your strong processes, of course, improving your bottom line throughout, and garnering new market share. So, and then improving your position with your industry. The most important thing, I think, in improvement is that we're always moving forward, always building and sustaining your goals that you are already achieving today, that we're not diminishing on those. And in this, you get formal coaching and consulting of 32 hours. And with that, what I'd like to share with you, this is a big slide, I would call. It is the Gartner model, and it's to help you on providing that resilient demand maturity model. And Gartner set this up on the y-axis on mindset. Are you inside out or outside in? And then on the x-axis, it's, are you cost focused or service focused? Of course, we want to all be service focused, but not at any cost. So it's always a trade-off between those two. At stage 1, the Gartner model talked about, the business units they're really kind of floating around independently, and they're not really working together at all. Stage 2, they're starting to work together. They're all following a similar format. Stage 3, you move to a more integrated supply chain, where you talk about supply and demand across your supply chain. You are doing some centralization at that time. That makes sense. If you try to push centralization in a stage 1 model, and if you're at stage 1 and you try to push standards centralization, most companies end up failing. So getting organized at the business unit level is pretty critical before trying to centralize. Once you centralize in stage 3, which is what we call the wall, now you're moving back out to becoming a service company where a customer is king, and you're moving into that value network. So how do our tiers match up here? Well, we feel that we really feel that tier 1 is, anyone can take tier 1 no matter where you are in your evolution. But tier 2, it does help you get your business units aligned. Tier 3, if you're moving on to stage 2, that tier 3 assessment, bringing in the best-in-class industry segmentation and helping you link into your annual operating plan works very well. And then the playbook, tier 4, plays very well to help you prepare yourself to get over this wall, so that when you launch your supply chain risk and resiliency program, you're ready to navigate the stage 3 typical barrier. Again, it's very common for companies to attempt to go from 1 to 3 to 4, and we call it the 1, 2, 3 step, and bounce back and forth over multiple years, over 3 to 5 year spans. It's very hard. Only about 20 to 30% of the companies are above stage 3, and very few exemplars are at the stage 4 and 5, because it's a tough journey. And that's one of the reasons we built this whole system, is to help you achieve and mature above stage 2 and 3. With that, back to Greg.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. We think we're, as Jim said, we think we're aligned pretty well with the Gartner business model. And what we found over the years, we were compelled to build out and update this supply chain readiness assessment tool in anticipation of moving companies forward with a formal supply chain risk and resiliency, as opposed to just supply chain management. So we think there's a nice alignment between the 4 tiers and the Gartner model, and we wanted to share that with you. This is what we see. We give you some insight from exemplars in terms of supply chain performance. Over the last 15, 20 years, these are the statistics that we have accumulated and compiled for you, meaning what do the exemplars get from supply chain maturity improvement? Here's some statistics. They increasingly have the ability to retain customers with a result of 3 to 7% increase in sales. Remember, when you lose a customer, it's debilitating. It takes 3x, 4x time and money and funding to gain that customer back. So you want to retain customers, and that gives you an increase in sales. Improving delivery. Some exemplars are at 99%. Some exemplars are bringing stockouts down to 0 to 5%, especially in retail and in grocery. Reducing cycle times by 10 to 20% because time in supply chain is money. Increasing market share. If you do those things well, you are going to increase your market share. You're going to take product from your competitors. And improving speed to market. Just some revenue threads. Other threads. Profitability. The exemplars basically run with anywhere from 7 to 10% cost advantage over average performers. And you saw some of the data from Aberdeen. It's not just us and our observation. We accumulate data from other research organizations as well. A lot of the exemplars are already reducing their markdowns and scrap. If you're in retail, that's markdowns are brutal at the end of a season. If you're in heavy industry, scrap is going to catch you as well, and they're reducing both 40 to 50% because of all the other mature things they're doing in supply chain. Think of capital utilization. The premier and exemplars run with 40 to 60%, 65% average in cash conversion cycle times. Time is money, remember. Cash conversion cycle, inventory plus receivables minus payables. If you're not using that metric, go find it on Wikipedia and start calculating it and see where you stand relative to your competitors. They also utilize resources anywhere from 10 to 20% more efficiently. That's people, processes, and fixed assets. And finally, you do all those things and more, you're going to run with 40 to 80% less inventory than your competitors. And these exemplars continue to look, even during the pandemic, continue to look at good balance and managing their inventory levels. And a lot of them operate anywhere from 10 to 50% less than their nearest competitor and still fulfill their obligation to their customers. So pretty compelling, especially in times of crisis. So our last section, I believe, is linking maturity to the financial performance. This slide is kind of our so what slide. So what's in it for me? Well, think of it this way. On the top left, does it pay to be a leader in your industry in supply chain maturity? We think the answer is an emphatic yes. We've described to you the industry benchmark quartiles, and we'll give you a little bit of what we've seen. And we all see this in MBA 401 marketing classes. Think of the quartiles like this. The first quartile, in the first quartile, companies in an industry are buying other companies. In the second quartile, companies are rationalizing. What do we mean? They're selling, they're rationalizing their products, all right, because they're marginal, and they might even be selling divisions that do not bring in an ROI. If you're in the third quartile, companies are being bought by the other companies. And in the fourth quartile, companies basically are going out of business. So the big question is, where are you positioned in your industry? We want to emphatically say that linking supply chain maturity to financial performance, we feel, is very compelling. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
We hope you're convinced. So please do contact us. If you have any questions regarding tiers 1 through 4, let us know how you feel about the process. If you have any questions, what product line you might want to analyze, and how we can assist you going forward. Again, to get started, the free assessment is out there. Just click on to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium.com, SCRM.com. That's one way to do it, or contact us, or join the link that will be sent out and in closing of this webinar. But please do reach out to us. And just to wrap it up for this webinar series, this is our capstone. We will be having a webinar next month in October on the supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. Where are you from a supply chain risk and resiliency, which ties directly into what we're talking about here. Is that's kind of your next step beyond supply chain management, is to find out where are you from a supply chain risk and resiliency perspective. And that will be next month about this time. So we hope to see you there. And just wrapping up the webinar, I want to, of course, thank you for your questions and comments and participating in the survey. Greg, thanks for the supply chain, bringing us on that supply chain management. And Connor, thank you for your support throughout the webinar. And most importantly, again, thank you for your insightful questions and comments. We appreciate it. And we hope you've gained some insights that you can take back into your workplace in today's highly tumultuous climate, as we weather the storm of the bullwhip effect due to COVID over the last next 18 to 36 months. The global supply chains are realigning. We've come to learn that driving volume at any cost will negatively impact your company. Robbing Peter to Paul is not going to help at this time. Going to have to think a little bit more long-term than that. This has been proven through multiple studies over the last 20, 40 years, as we've covered in this case study today. And we understand that developing an execution strategy takes time and effort. The supply chain management assessment accelerates the time to gain organizational alignment and a single action plan, while continuing to track your increased maturity so you can gain your unfair market share going forward. It is through leveraging each other that we all become more resilient. And Greg, your closing comments.
You bet. I want to thank everyone for participating in the Capstone chat. We hope that you get the sense that we feel pretty confident, as do other professionals, that increasing your supply chain maturity leads to improvement of the bottom line and can only enhance your organization's street value, especially in times of crisis like we're all living with today. So thanks again, and we wish you all the best.